Now, many people are saying to the UK column, we can see all the terrible things. We need some good news. And in the second half of today's UK column news, we're going to have a look at people who are fighting back. And I'm going to concentrate in this next segment on former Tory MP Andrew Bridgen, who Friday night, just gone, gave a talk about his experiences as an MP in Totnes. My goodness, it was incredible. And of course, none of his information appeared in the Sunday Telegraph or the BBC. And if we have a listen to some of these clips, you will understand why. But I am going to say this is such important material. I'm going to allow today's news to overrun slightly from our normal time, but I think the information is vital. We're going to be looking at Andrew Bridgen talking about really what is really going on in politics in UK. So let's have a look at the introduction where Andrew Bridgen was welcomed in by Patrick Henningsen.
So finally, we had a voice in Westminster. A fearless voice, a champion of truth and justice, and he's going to be sharing his story with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Andrew Bridgen.
This evening I'm going to tell you a lot of things that have happened over the last 5 years. Many of you have experienced yourself and what it was like being in Parliament when these strange things were going on. And the proudest moment I ever had in my life was standing up in the House of Commons and speaking the unpalatable truth. In a chamber which is supposedly the mother of all parliaments, where your elected representatives are supposed to speak without fear or favour. Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that in the House of Commons there is a lot of fear and there is a lot of favour. I want to give you a little bit of my background. It's fair to say I didn't get into politics the normal way, and when I think the moment came to stand up and warn the people about what was going on, there were no takers.
So this is the first very important point by Andrew Bridgen, that when he realised things were wrong, he went for support amongst his colleagues. There was no support, as we will hear later. When he went to the mainstream press, there was no support, there was no reporting. But also, of course, many people don't want to hear what's happening because they're frightened of the information. But if we're going to fight what's happening, we have to stand up and be counted. And every adult man or woman in this country needs to know what's really happening. Now, let's listen to Andrew Bridgen talking about David Cameron and Boris Johnson and how they think is really the subject.
This is what I came to Colville in 2005 with Michael Howard on the campaign trail. He says, "What a SH1T hole." Wow. I said, "Well, that's on my postal address." I said, I'm not some parachuted-in candidate. This is where I was brought up. I said, "We will win." I said, "We just had the biggest swing in the country in the local elections, and we've destroyed the Labour Party. The councillor base has gone, and we will win. And I don't need the party's money, I've got my own money." And quite honestly, David, I said, if you feel like that about North West Leicestershire, best you never come here again. and to be honest, David Cameron can be a man of his word. Because he never came to North West Leicestershire ever again. And we didn't miss him. Boris Johnson never wanted us to leave the European Union. The establishment didn't want us to leave the European Union, which is why, despite voting to leave, we've only ever had the worst parts of Brexit. Yeah. It's all been scuppered by the establishment, punish us for having the temerity to vote against their wishes. They hate democracy, and I made a prediction at the time that it'll be a very long time before they ever allow the British people to have another referendum after you blooded the establishment's nose.
Well, that was pretty direct, and of course it gave us a glimpse into the deep mind of David Cameron, utter arrogance, those horrible little poor people up north. And with regard to Brexit, it was a big game. And of course, UK Column always labelled it Brexit without the exit. Now, Andrew Bridgen went on to talk about what he discovered around COVID. Let's have a listen.
At an R rate of 3, that meant for every person who caught it, they gave it to 3 others. What we knew from South Africa was that the Omicron variant was a lot milder, less lethal, but it was very contagious, had an R rate of 12. So it's 4 times more easily transmitted. And we know that whatever lockdown measures were taken, they didn't stop the spread of whatever it was. So what lockdown measures could possibly stop something with an R rate of 3 but was less than half as lethal? And why would you want to try? So in December 21, I was pretty shocked when the first week in December I got an invite to go to a party at number 10. We were going to hear more about these parties. And I'd already got wind in Parliament that they were going to try and lock us down December to Christmas 21 again. So I wrote back to Boris Johnson and said, thanks for the invite, but I've got wind that you're going to try and restrict the freedoms of my constituents this Christmas in a few weeks' time. I'm going to vote against it, I'll speak against it, I think it's wrong. And because of that, it's completely inappropriate, even though it's within the rules at the moment, if you go and have a lovely party at number 10 and some drinks. I think it's inappropriate if in a couple of weeks' time you're going to take the freedoms of my people away again. So I'm not coming. And the week after, I got another invite to another party the week after. And by this time it was out that they were looking to take away your freedoms again. And I said, well, you're now saying you're going to do this. And I wrote to you last week, so I'm definitely not coming. I'm happy to have a business meeting with the Prime Minister if we wanted to discuss policy, but I'm not coming to a Christmas party when you're going to take away the public's freedom. And then the week after that, the third week in December, Partygate broke, didn't it? So then you realise why they'd invited all the MPs to number 10, so they wanted everybody's hands in the blood. Yeah. We'd all been to parties. Yeah, I haven't.
So the truth coming out about COVID, and yes, Andrew Bridgen did get caught up initially with vaccines, but once he discovered what was going on, he's been prepared to speak out, and that has cost him not only his business life, it's cost him his personal life and his family. So tremendous courage to tour the country, speaking out as an alienated MP, now former MP, warning people about the way that the UK Parliament and political system actually thinks. And of course, it is an incredibly callous viewpoint coming out of Westminster. We need more MPs to break ranks. So we would say to the audience, if you've got some doubts or you don't agree with everything that Andrew Bridgen is saying, that's your entitlement, but respect what he is doing to get the word out about what he was able to challenge and what he's been able to uncover. This is him talking about the post office scandal, which of course resulted in destroyed lives, people in prison, and indeed suicides.
For many, many months, Fujitsu claimed that Mr. Rudkin had never been on the premises. I told them that Mr. Rudkin had claimed he'd signed the visitors book on that day, and helpfully Fujitsu said that they lost the visitors book for the day in question. Eventually, a whistleblower came forward from Fujitsu, one of the IT engineers, and he verified everything that Michael Rudkin had said.
Ron Warmington was the forensic accountant I recommended to the government to investigate with a view to administering a mediation scheme for the victims.
he saw the bigger picture, much bigger picture. There were many, many more people impacted, and he understood the consequences.
Why? Well, because the government...
My part has been written out of this drama. I don't think any of us are surprised by that. But what ITV have also written out is its own refusal to tell this story when the broadcaster was first told about it by me in 2014. Its chief executive at the time was Adam Crozier, who at the height of the scandal was in charge of Royal Mail, of which the Post Office was then part. ITV doesn't mention its old boss in the drama series either.
I went to the BBC, to ITV, to Sky, to Channel 4 News. I went to the Times, I went to the Telegraph, I went to the Daily Mail. I didn't actually get an article in the Sunday Express. Caroline Wheeler was the political editor of the Sunday Express at the time, and we did a small article about it, which is all we could get in, about this huge miscarriage of justice. Caroline subsequently moved to the Times, the Sunday Times, and I was expecting, we were all optimistic that now she was at a broadsheet newspaper, the newspaper of record, that we'd be able to expose this great injustice. But the fact is that Caroline Wheeler went to the Sunday Times, her ability to get that story out disappeared with her move.
Well, he says a lot to there, but in the final clip, we really understand how Parliament works when a system that wants to shut him up resorts not only to pressure, but to outright bribery. Let's have a listen.
This junior civil servant, there are hundreds and hundreds. All of Downing Street is actually one big office block with two flats in there, one at number 10 and one number 11. All the buildings are linked. Number 9, 10 and 11 Downing Street, they're all linked behind the front wall. And there are hundreds of civil servants working there and advisors. And one of them wrote an email to his line manager during the lockdowns, and he said, "Don't you think we ought to enforce masking and social distancing in the building, because we've inflicted it on the public?" And the email came back from his manager, "Nah, because we've checked out with a scientist and none of it works." But since there are cameras always outside the front door, when you go home or go out, you make sure you put your mask on and social distance for the cameras. It was a complete con, and I was pretty angry about that. I'd seen the impact it had had on my constituents, economically, mentally, physically, and I wasn't happy about that. So I wrote, the first week in January 22, I wrote a full page in the Telegraph saying, "Thanks, Boris, but goodbye, time to go." And that is when they came to me to number 10 and asked, and I'd already spoken in the debate in December and voted against the NHS mandates, the masking, the social distancing, any restrictions of freedoms. And they came to me in the January 22, and it was unreal. They came to me and said, "What do you want, Andrew?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, what do I want?" They said, "Well, you tell us what you want to shut up and we'll just get it for you." I said, "Oh, what, anything?" They said, "Well, pretty much. Just tell us what you want, we'll get it for you, and then you shut up." Oh. I said, "Is that the game we're playing, really?" He said, "That's the game we're playing now." I said, "In that case, if that's the game we're playing, and I can have anything I want, I think I better have the Prime Minister's resignation letter, haven't I?" And unfortunately, they told me that was the one thing I couldn't have. So I said, "Well, I don't want any, if that's the game we're playing, I don't want anything else, do I?" And it was pretty much war after that. And they inflicted some very severe financial harm on me through the corruption of the judiciary, repeatedly. And all those millions I'd earned, they were separated from my businesses. I had £2 million in my private pension fund before I became ever elected in 2010. No access to any of that money, not to this day.
Well, that says it all, not only a corrupt Westminster, but corruption amongst the judiciary. And of course, many people who go through the family courts are only too aware of that as their children are stolen behind closed doors. But speak out, and the state, the political state of UK, wants to destroy you. So this really sets the whole scene. The country is being attacked, and the policies are coming out of our own government. And clearly this needs to be dealt with before we're going to be able to clean anything up. Diane,